Uh, um, Hello. I made this channel really to create some kind of like outlet for myself, and I don't exactly know what I'll do with this in the future or anything like that. But you know, I thought I should try doing something, and then that's talking. I may end up talking about some heavy things in this video, but my intentions are to hopefully relate to someone out there and build some type of connection or a community based on support. Maybe, we can struggle together for however long this video lasts or, this channel. But, at least there was someone that, you can say, hey, I feel you, and I hope we'll all do better. I hope to receive comments and feedback about things, and I would really love to hear other people's stories and their thoughts on life and how they're feeling, and whether they gotten past things and are they struggling now, and I don't really have a script for this. I'm kind of just gonna talk about uh, myself and really just my mentality. Um, you know, right now I'm grieving. You know, I'm sad, and I feel like as a person I've I just lost a lot. Very lately and very soon. Um, like last year, my mom died and she passed away, and um, she was struggling a lot, with addiction and substance abuse, stuff like that, and so a lot of it was, you know, I spent a good amount of my years out of high school and some years in it, trying to talk to her and being there and things like that, battling with her to like get up and, say, you got this and stuff like that. Um, and she passed away, I got, I was kind of like doing more for myself, and I started finally like going out there and enjoying life more, and or trying to, and I left on a trip, and then she seemed stressed while I was out on the trip, but I left on the trip, and then I come back, and you know I I remember that day exactly. Like I can remember her face and the things we talked about. I remember that we she had picked me up, and we were in the car, and she had like we had to talk about like, oh yeah, hey, I wouldn't just leave you, if you did drugs, like again right randomly, but I would be hurt about it, and I would have to like take some time away, but I wouldn't like lose connection because you're my mother, and I was like, as long as you just tell me, I wouldn't, I wouldn't feel hurt about that thing. Um, Little did I know she lied straight to my face. She did that a lot though, but that wasn't like, so when she did it, it was kind of something I just laughed about later on. But when it first happened and she passed away later that day, or that night, um, I remember being like angry that she did that. You know, um, I love my mom, and I miss her a lot, and I wish she was here, and I wish I could talk to her about things. Um, I depended on her like kind of quite a lot, so mentally and physically, like as a not like a caretaker, but she was, she allowed me to live there and go to school for free, so I'm really thankful to my mom. um you know and recently, on top of that, I recently like split ways with my partner. You know, we just broke up. I don't know why I said it like that, but you know, I broke up with my partner, and you know, I really wish she was here right now because I'd have somebody to like get that out of. You know, um, so it's been hard. You know, especially this breakup for me. You know, like I don't have like a lot of thoughts. You know, that like seem to go not go away. You know, it's been like a month really, and I guess it's better than the first time, but you know, it's hard to like be okay. It's hard to not think about somebody, you know, especially somebody that was there in such a hard time for you. Um, I realized I did kind of like a lot of like microaggression things, like or not microaggression, but you know, I was kind of like, you know, I would say things I didn't really mean to. I was borderline abusive, to be honest. I feel like emotionally, you know, I it wasn't like bad, but you know, I think I would say like moments where I'd be like, you don't love me, and I didn't really believe that, but you know, I had a lot of doubt in myself as a person, and I didn't feel like I was worth loving. But at the same, you know, a lot of the same time, you know, I didn't feel like I was worth, you know, I was needed in her life too, you know. I didn't feel like she needed me or she wanted me. Like a lot of my value wasn't the same as what she could have gotten from other things. Um, you know, that was hard. It's still hard, you know, because like I said, it's only been a month, and we still like we don't talk, but you know, we did talk recently. And, you know, that really hit me again, and it's interesting to think how fast a month passed, but you know, it still feels like it was yesterday. You know, we were together. It still feels like I could call her, and then you know, um, and it hurts. It really does. You know, not having somebody there around you, in that way. I like to think that she was a really big help to my recovery process. You know, I feel like a lot of things I wouldn't have gotten over myself or worked through normally if I didn't, you know, if I wasn't with her. Uh, and I really appreciate her for a lot of those things, but I don't know why if I never told her that. You know, I don't know why. I could have, you know, maybe because I didn't realize or work through them myself. But you know, I guess I tried not to focus on those things a lot when I was with her. Uh, you know, and I don't, you know, I don't think she'll see this, but you know, I told her already, but you know, I apologize a lot for my behavior. I don't like the way I acted and the things I did. You know, uh, I've been really hard on myself lately. Um, I'm really beating myself up, and I've really been like this. You know, and a lot of people tell me like, yeah, you man, you know, I understand. You know, you feel bad for those things, but you were grieving. You know, you've been going through things a lot. You know, uh, for like 8 years, you know, you were dealing with the whole thing with your mom, and you know, and onwards. You know, I didn't really have a job or stable, living conditions. I still don't, I mean, my living situation is fine. I'm paying rent every day, but I don't have a job. I want a job and I plan on it. But I don't have a job. I don't know how to drive, stuff like that. Where, I mean, but I feel like driving isn't worth it right now. Anyways, I can't afford a car, but I don't have a job, so I'm gonna afford a car. Stuff like that. Um, I I just like I've been really in my head. I've been really beating myself up about this relationship thing. Uh, because I really worked on myself. I really tried a lot. Um, and you don't want to think that way. You don't want to think negative, but um, you kind of want to feel like you kind of go away with these feelings, thinking like, I my efforts weren't appreciated. I wasn't noticed for my feelings, my state of mind, and maybe that's my fault for not talking about it, but at the same time, whose place is it to do that? It's not her job to like to manage that, and to deal with that. And I appreciate her for staying for so long, but it hurts. It hurts to lose somebody you put in your mind you want it to change for. You put in your mind that you need to work on yourself for this person. Um, I know that you should be like, yeah, you should work on yourself, and I think that's the most important thing. And that's something I understand now and I value. But when I first did this, I go to therapy and everything like that. When I first started it, I did that for her, and as I kept going and kept like looking towards myself, I realized there was a lot of internal issues with myself as a person that I needed to get through, and I tried, and I'm gonna keep trying because the the only thing you can do really for anything, when you're in a state like this, is to help yourself, and look for sources that can help you and are able to lift you up out of it. Not everybody can, and not everybody will want to, but you find things and you find people that work for you. But yeah, whole point is I miss my partner. I I miss a lot of the things we did. I miss the comfort we had. You know, even for a long distance relationship, it was something like where uh, it was nice having somebody. It was nice having somebody you could say "I love you" to every day. It was nice. It was nice. Sorry, I'm having fighting back emotions. It was nice, having telling somebody good morning, good night. You know, it was nice looking forward to seeing a text from somebody. It was nice doing things we liked. It was nice hearing from each other, and it was nice trying to support somebody, um, even if I wasn't good at it or she wasn't. it was still the efforts that mattered most of all. Um, I really think about, you know, and I think these are emotions or things I'm gonna think about, things that I'm gonna miss, and things that I loved about her. There's more, but I feel like I shouldn't say too much without like doxing, um, or like giving too much information. Uh, and I don't know where I'm at, mentally, uh, especially with that. Sometimes I want to be upset about things, but it goes away really quickly because I can only say that I miss her a lot. I can only say that I'm hurt. Um, and I can only say that I did a lot of things wrong, and I can only say that things didn't go the way I expected, and this and that. But at the end of the day, what does a lot of that do for you? What do you gain from that as a person? You don't really gain anything. You just make yourself sad, and that's not good for you. That's not good for me, and that's not good for a lot of people. Nobody wants to feel sad because feeling sad is sad. Like when I feel sad, I get frustrated. I get annoyed. Now. Before I would tell myself I want to die and I want to kill myself, and but right now at this moment I'm angry about it. Like I'm like I'm here again, oh brother. You know, I'm I'm upset about it, and I want to move on. And it's hard to. It's hard to be okay, and it's hard to function every day and not feel like you're struggling. Uh, I really like to play the game, and I played video games a lot for a lot of my life, and I do things like watch anime and stuff. But like a few days ago, I was fine, but uh, really recently, this last week, I felt like it felt like so undesirable, to do those things. Um, it was like I was fighting like every fiber of my being, and I just didn't want to do that. I tried to watch an anime, and I got through like one episode for one, and I was like, I went from laughing to a scene to like crying at the end of it. Then like the middle of the next one, I'm like constantly pausing it because I have to cry after every often. And it's just like it's frustrating. And I remember I got up. I remember I got up and I just went outside and just walked. And sometimes walking helps. It helps people. It helped me, and it helped me. I just talked to myself when I walked. I walked, and I talked, and I was like, where am I here? What do I want to do? What thoughts am I thinking about? You gotta be really like aware of yourself. To get over things. You gotta be aware of what's starting these things, and you gotta be aware of like how often you're thinking these things, and you really have to work to get over things. You really have to work for it. because your brain is so used to, like, especially when your brain is so used to being in a certain state for so long, you know, when every day has been numb for years on years, when, you know, it's like, or year after year, it's hard to escape, you know, it's hard to not want to give up, and it's hard not to find a place in where you're at. But you know, just because you don't, you know, but you just have to find that, you know. You have to find what works for you now, you know. Maybe the things that you loved then don't, you know, they don't feel the same, you know. Maybe you were like a hardcore gamer, you know, back in high school, or still are, you know, or were, I don't know, you know, but now, like, maybe that doesn't do it for you. So maybe, you know, pick up a paintbrush or something, you know. um, Maybe you were an artist, you know, you started drawing and you're drawing heavily in school, and, you know, maybe you don't really like that now. Start doing music, I don't know, you know, explore yourself more, you know. A lot of getting better takes, it takes time, and it takes time with yourself. Um, it's what a lot of people tell me, and a lot of people just repeat, you know. And if so many people are saying it, you know, it's kind of like, well, you know, it's gotta be true. Um, I know you shouldn't take things as surface value, but, you know, I think in that case, that is one of the things that is true, you know. You won't get better until you value yourself in some way. If you don't get anywhere, you know, if you don't do something you like, if you don't find something you like, if you don't just do something, you know, it can be small, it can be big, it can be anything, you know. Um, I think personally, big goals aren't the best. I think it's best to start with small things, because when you fail at those small things, they're easier to jump back into, you know. When you say, like, okay, well, today I want to listen to a song, you know, every day, or I want to study a song, or, you know, you get one song and you listen to it and you really study it, you know. You say, hey, I want to cook more, eat eggs, you know, more, you know. So then you're like, okay, you know, you just get up and you go and try to make some eggs, you know. Um, it's really like, you know, that's it, really. You know, you have to do something to get somewhere. Um, the worst thing you can do is nothing for yourself. No matter what, it's always about yourself, uh, regardless of the situation. It can be for different reasons. It can be like, you know, I don't think I'm a bad person, but everybody thinks I'm a bad person, you know? Well, you gotta really look at yourself and say, you know, why do people think I'm a bad person? You know, why do I not think I'm a bad person? You know, maybe the things you say are, you know, they aren't interpreted, you know, like right. Not right, but, you know, they aren't, you know, people don't really understand what you're trying to say. You know, maybe you say things pretty bluntly and you're just being honest and you mean good by that, but, you know, a lot of people don't understand it. You know, that's where you can come in and say to myself, okay, so how do I be honest in a nice way? You know, how do I explain things more where they won't get hurt? You know, you have to find that. Maybe it could be like, Uh, I have a trouble sometimes. I might do this a few often. I'm surprised I haven't done it already, but I forgot what I was talking about. Originally, and then I kind of like yapped on. Uh, but like maybe it was like working on yourself or something like that, right? But just work on yourself. Um, my mom always said that she wanted to do like podcast and or write like diaries and stuff like that or books. And I thought like this isn't a podcast, but at least I'd make like a channel and really talk about something. Um, you know, that's really it. Yeah, I just wanted to get my mind out there, and I wanted to talk about my grief. I wanted to talk about, how much I miss my mom and I loved her. I wanted to talk about how my current breakup has been hard on me. Um, and I really wanted to find some place where I can do that. Um, therapy is nice and therapy is good because I think, therapy puts you on track, I guess. Like therapy gives you a outline and it says, all right, this is what I think and this is where you need to go. They give you the tools and the things and to step in there, but uh, for the most part, what to get there, that's what you have to do. And I'm trying to find that right now. By doing this. I'm trying to talk about my feelings and talk about myself, and then hopefully maybe somebody else will see that and they go, wow, I struggle with this too, or I struggle with something else, but uh, or I had that problem back in the day, and this is what worked for me. I'm not that old. I'm like in my 20s. I'm not really like I'm like halfway 25. I'm not that old. So I don't know everything, and I don't know if everything will work for me, but I know that I want to try to do things. I want a life at this point. I want to be better. Uh, you know, I don't really know. Like I miss my mom. I miss my partner. I wish I had more time with both. I I wish I didn't lose so much, and I wish I didn't waste a lot of my life. You know, a good portion of just fucking up. Excuse my language. I was gonna try to not to curse, but I guess that came out. Uh, but yeah, I want to spend a lot of my life not messing things up and doing more. But I'm in the position where even though I did do those things, and you know, I did mess up. Whoopsie. I did mess up. You know, I can still change. I can still grow and I can still get somewhere. Not because I'm in a good state or anything exactly, but because I'm alive. You know, of all things to be proud of, you should say, I'm still here. You know? I'm still able to breathe, and I'm still able to think, you know, and whatever state you're in, you try to do what you can at the most, If you can't move your whole body, you move an arm. If you can't move an arm, you move a finger, If you can't move a finger, you you move your eyelids, you blink, and you move up. Uh, uh, you know, uh, yeah. So I hope this reaches someone. I hope I get feedback, and I hope I go somewhere. But if it doesn't, I don't really care. Of course, that's my goal, and I would like that from this. But really, I just wanted to speak. I wanted to verbally let out my thoughts and not feel like they're going anywhere. I wanted somewhere where they could go. Um, I wouldn't mind feedback, and I wouldn't mind relatable stories, and I wouldn't mind, tips and tricks. I hope my voice wasn't terrible, and thank you for listening. I don't really have much to talk about, because then to be honest, I'm just gonna talk about missing my partner. I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, we had a lot of good moments. I miss her, and I would have cried right now. Because right now, that is the thing that has affected me the most. Right now, that is the thing I wish I had. That is the thing I really put a lot into myself, and I need to get over right now. I don't know how I'll get over it. I don't know where I will go from this. I just know that I'm going to keep working on myself, and I'm going to find some way to grow, even if I don't, get the best growth, or, it's like I become an asshole from this. I really don't intend for that, but, I did grow. Fortunately, it was not in a positive way, but, let's try to hope for positive growth, more than anything. But, because you don't want to grow from this, and you're angry from everything, and you think relationships are terrible, and you'll never be able to do one again, because, that's detrimental. I feel like I said that wrong. I stuttered at the end. But I feel like it hinders you, in the future. Because now you're the angry guy. Everybody knows, you're quick to blow it or something. You don't want to be that. You don't want to get angry at everything. You don't want to, stifle yourself like that. Because if you're angry at everything, what do you spend, what do you spend time doing, aside from just being angry and bitter? I don't know. I'm just talking, I guess. I'm not like a future guru, and I know everything. I just, I'm just getting my thoughts out there, talking about stuff. And that's really it, Maybe I'll get a webcam or something, or maybe I'll start putting like something in the background. But for now, I think this is what I'll do my first video as, and this is what I'm talking about. I wanted to talk about grief and sadness and trying ways to get over that. You know,